Many years ago, I got into the habit of enjoying reading magazines as a change of pace for all the professional theological reading that I do. Good magazines like Vanity Fair. Back in the day, at least, The Hollywood Reporter. British Hello to keep me up with British popular culture. And yes, if you're wondering, Garden and Gun. Parishioner has been very kind over the years to keep me in Garden and Gun. My plan is always to just enjoy an article once in a while and just to change up the pace of what I normally read. Well, in reality, I've accumulated a library of these magazines. There's quite a backlog. Yesterday, I thumbed through a Vanity Fair and I looked at the date, 2011. But I read it and got through it. Here's the point. What I've noticed over the years reading these backlogged magazines is oftentimes the person being profiled in 2011 or 2015, who at that point is at the top of their game, by the time I get to the article, they've fallen from grace. I've got magazines with people on the cover who would never again be on the cover of a magazine. It just is never lost on me. This is how I get back into my professional mode, even reading other literature. It's never lost on me how you can be on top of the world 1 minute and brought low the next. My favorite English priest and spiritual writer was fond of saying, life has a way of reducing us to our proper size. There's so much truth in that one line. Life has a way of reducing us to our proper size. Celebrities, athletes, politicians, us. It's never lost on me when I notice someone's fall from grace in the public eye. If it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. It's also never lost on me. If it can happen to them, it can happen to me. So we know that we fall from grace, all of us, celebrities, athletes, politicians. Us, we know that we have those times in our lives when we miss the mark, when we drift from what we know to be the truth. All of us do it, and yet don't we love a comeback? We love to see redemption. I know we've got at least one serious golfer in the room. There may be more. Golf wasn't a part of my family's world. We just didn't think much about golf. And also, though right-handed is my dominant hand, I always batted left. I'm a left-hander in sports. And when I was young, people said with conviction, left-handers can't play golf. You can't buy clubs if you're left-handed. In many ways, that was true back then. It's always interesting that something thought impossible at one point, oftentimes with enough time, becomes very possible and indeed normative. But the point here is I'm not a golfer, and I certainly don't enjoy watching it on TV normally. But in 2019, I could not be aware that Tiger Woods, for all of his personal struggles, some of which self-inflicted, and despite all of his injuries, I was aware that Tiger Woods had a chance to win the Masters after all that he had been through. And so I timed it just right to tune in just for the last couple of holes on that Sunday in 2019. But as Tiger got closer and closer, and when he finally actually won the tournament, I sat there and cried, watching golf, which I don't like, because what I was watching was redemption, a comeback, a restoration to grace. and peace. I cried watching a person in the end just like us experience redemption. Life does have a way of reducing us to our proper size. All of us have our times of struggle when we face illness or a loved one faces illness. And of course, the prospect and the reality of death in the end reduces us all to our proper size. And all of us know, every one of us in this room, everyone watching online knows that in the end, the true virtue is humility. We know that we're meant to have a humble spirit. We can admire people who are genuinely humble. We can aspire to be like them. And yet most of us struggle shunning selfishness. It's so easy for all of us to fall back into the habit of losing a sense of our true and healthy humility. This parable that we've had Sunday and now again today is one of the great examples in all of literature, biblical or otherwise, about coming to a true state of humility. The Pharisee would have known every religious tradition. He would have known every commandment. He would have been in worship more than anyone else in the community. And yet in the parable, he's fallen into the trap of arrogance and contempt for others. Meanwhile, the tax collector would have been the lowest of the low in the community, the person that everyone would have despised and shunned, would have been that person who was a traitor, who was a collaborator with the Romans by collecting taxes on their behalf. In this brief parable, there is the perfect picture of a person who, with good intentions, has nonetheless drifted into arrogance. Nor is there a better picture of a person who, on the whole, has chosen the wrong path and yet comes to his senses and finds redemption. It's not the religious leader in the parable. It's the tax collector. It's the sinner who says, God, be merciful to me. And Jesus concludes the parable with, he's the one who went home justified. The tax collector is the one who was justified. Justified here has a deeper sense than mere forgiveness. As important as forgiveness is, of course, the tax collector went home in right relationship with God. He was justified because of his humility. He knew that he needed God's grace to get back on the path towards spiritual wholeness and peace. I just leave us with this thought. The tax collector's route to restoration, to redemption, to peace started when he was honest with himself and with God. The tax collector facing the truth about himself, admitting his need for God's grace, is the beginning of his restoration to wholeness and peace. Amen.